All right, good evening for the Purple Group, April, I said March, April. Where we kind of had a theme of astronomy earlier. We teamed up with the blue team and had some, the Lawrence Astronomers Club came and brought some telescopes we looked through. But we are reading, the autobiography of the Milky Way. The Milky Way, an autobiography of our galaxy by Moiya McTier. And I will start off by reading the cover flap. Dr. Moiya McTier is an astrophysicist, folklorist, and science communicator. After graduating from Harvard as the first person in the school's history to study both astronomy and mythology, Moiya earned her PhD in astrophysics at Columbia University, where she was selected as a National Science Foundation Research Fellow. Moiya has consulted with companies like Disney and PBS on their fictional worlds, helped design exhibits for the New York Hall of Science, and given hundreds of talks about science around the globe. McTier also hosts and produces the Explore podcast, which explores fictional world building through the lens of science. So she wrote this book as kind of a first person narrative of the Milky Way, telling us how the Milky Way started, grew up, how it is now, and then ultimately, tells us how it's eventually going to end, or the possibilities, right? And so it's very tongue in cheek, where
Right.
the answer really is we don't know exactly, but the way she puts it is interesting, because she's like, of course I know how I'm gonna end, because I know how Milky Ways end. But I'm not gonna spoil you the surprise, so I'll just tell you how your scientists think, I'm gonna end. Which is
Right.
is quite-
Yes, because she's telling the story from the perspective of
from the perspective of the
right?
Milky Way.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. It's interesting. There's several times where, there's parts where it is kind of funny and cheeky, how she's like, oh yeah, you silly humans, you're small and insignificant, and you of course don't know. But there's some times where I'm like, okay, that's enough. Like, it's just a little too condescending,
Uh-huh.
and a little too, put downish, but
It was a lot over the course of
it,
the
yeah,
part of the book
right.
that I
If
read.
it's in a couple of them, I think it would have been funny, but I think, when it talks about reminding us how small we are,
Right.
multiple, almost every other page,
Uh-huh.
showing us how small we are, right, is much better than telling as we mean. But
Right.
that was the only real kind of negative point I have. There was a lot of, again, it's just very lighthearted, good science, that it's dumbed down enough that we somewhat understood.
Right,
There's a lot of
yeah.
parts that I didn't. And it's like,
Still.
I need more of a picture.
Uh-huh.
Like, I need a graph of like what you're talking about here. But yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
I didn't get in until late. Can you hear me?
Hi, Chuck.
Yes. Hey Chuck, how are you doing?
Well, we didn't get the book, so I can't give you any comments on it, but I was just wondering what was it about?
Oh, sure. So it's called an autobiography of our galaxy, the Milky Way. And so it's an astrophysicist, Moiya McTier, and she's a doctor, PhD. But she has a degree in both astrophysics and in mythology. So there is an interesting point that she brings up, that she as a folklore, she talks, all the myths of, Norse mythology. She mentioned a lot more of Norse mythology actually than Greek and Roman. Of course, Christian mythology and Christian, tradition and stories from the Old and New Testaments. But she weaves those together, because again, like most of our planets and stars and stuff, we name after those kind of things. And the way she writes the book is interesting, because when she talks a lot about science and scientists, like, even Einstein or all these people who came up with them, she kind of bemeans them and saying, oh yeah, look at these people thinking they know what they're talking about and really they're wrong and, you know, X, Y, and Z. But she is very much more sympathetic to our ancestors when they talked about their mythology, which you think, oh, they're even more wrong. Like, of course, you talked about, you know, the Milky Way was, or the dark path was a way through to another world, I think in Norse mythology. And she's like, she explained she's much more sympathetic towards these ideas, which I thought is interesting that, you know, and it makes you think about what does it mean for mythology? Like, we always think of myth as something that's false, right? Mythbusters, oh, that's just a myth, it's wrong.
Right.
But really, myth is trying to explain something deeper, and it's almost like it's assumed that it's not literal, but you're trying to hit on something deeper that you don't understand, but you know that there's something true there, but you don't understand it.
Right,
So
I think she points out there's at least a kernel of truth.
right, yeah,
To it, and there's a reason.
Yeah.
And that exists.
So does she believe in anything in a God or spiritual thing? Does she believe in that at all? Or it's just myth?
well, yeah, so she doesn't explicitly say it, but it does sound that she's either atheist or agnostic.
That would be my guess.
Agnostic.
Yeah, but
What'd you
but
say?
again, she's not so, it's almost, again, she's using these, and she like, again, she talks about you know, John writing, you know, the letter of Revelation, not like that it's fake, but that they're trying to point out and trying to explain how the world works through the way they know how. So she's sympathetic to it, but I don't think she necessarily believes explicitly, if that makes.
You said that she was sure all the other people were wrong, but she's sure she's correct, or what's her
Well,
thought
The
about that?
galaxy is
Oh,
correct.
well, I mean, when she says they're wrong, it's scientists coming up with theories, right, that eventually get proven wrong, right? Like,
Yeah.
Einstein believed that when the universe is formed, like the universe wasn't expanding.
Mm.
And then, of course, later on, you know, several decades later, scientists proved that it was expanding, right? And we found dark matter, which dark matter is kind of this weird thing of like, we can do this math and figure out how many protons, electrons, neutrons there are in the universe, but if we calculate that, it doesn't match how much things weigh based on gravity calculations we do. So we've discovered that there's dark matter, which is matter we can't see, but it has to be there because we can see its effect on things. And so, and again, I think a lot of it is tongue in cheek about she's not really bemeaning Einstein. I think she really thinks that he has important things to say, and all these other
Right.
typical white guys. But
That's the way all discoveries begin, is a theory that
Right.
something exists or it doesn't exist, and
Right.
they examine that theory until they find out it's a fact or it's not a fact, whether it was Einstein's theory or somebody else's theory.
Right.
They still don't know the distance
And I
of the
think she
universe. It's
understands
infinite.
I think that's just part of the way, like, she writes it that way. She's not explicitly meaning she doesn't like them because they were wrong. It's just kind of the caricature she created, that's kind of making this act of story from the
Well, yeah.
from the galaxy's point of view.
Right, yeah.
And I think once you
like a
understand
character that she's developed, I guess it's like any author talking through a character.
Right,
Kind of
right,
assuming that that's what the author thinks because they have put this voice into the
Right.
character.
right. I mean, it's like any well, it's like, Bruce Springsteen or Bob Dylan or, again, any other singer-songwriter, like, they write these Willie Nelson, right? They write these very seemingly autobiographical characters in their songs. That doesn't mean that's what they believe, but they made this character that believes that. Based, and there are elements from their own personal experiences and personality that are in that. But that's just because they sing about something doesn't mean they actually believe that. They're just telling a story.
Right.
Which
You talk about religious mythology very much.
Say that again?
Does she talk about the religious mythology very much? The mythology of a God existing. Nobody can see it or prove it.
So she doesn't really mention God much. Specifically, other
Like
than,
the one God that.
right, yeah.
as
I
we
mean, I
know.
guess she doesn't mention spirituality much, like really at all.
Right.
Spirituality isn't really included in her book.
Yeah.
Um,
He really only talks about it in terms of myth, not.
Right.
not as- I know at one point she talked about capital B belief.
yeah,
And how, that could be belief in something, whether it was true or not, or whether part of it was true and,
Mhm.
a big portion of it isn't.
Yeah.
So.
I'm sorry,
but
we couldn't get the book. It was the book, Marcia was on the list and finally it
Yeah.
never did show up.
yeah, no worries. But yeah, I recommend it. It's a good read. Matt was really liking it. Which was cool. I did bookmark a couple of things. I didn't bookmark as much in this book. I'm not, it's one of those things that, like, sometimes I think I'm smart and then I read this and I'm like, no, I'm not. Cause like she explains things and you can tell she's dumbed it down extremely like shallow. And I'm still not understanding how like things work. I'm much more visual. Like if you drew a picture and like said, this is what it looks like and stuff, 100%, but yeah. for some reason-
Agreed. I'm right there with you. Particularly, there was one chapter.
Read that section you said you bookmarked.
Yeah, let's, you guys keep talking. Let me kind of find it here.
Was it where she was talking about, because in one she talked about distance, in one chapter she talked about distance. In the chapter it was.
Oh, hey, I found the belief part. Okay,
Okay.
well, let's see. Let me just read this. Take, for example, the myth. Oh, here we go.
What page are you on?
I am on page 88, 89. So the other one she talks about myth is also like Star Trek, Star Wars.
Yes, I love that, modern myths.
Yes.
That's where you are.
Yeah,
I love that chapter.
like this idea, like she mentioned sci-fi, right? This idea that we're trying to explain what could happen or something. All right, I am convinced your beloved sci-fi stories should certainly be considered myths. Take, for example, the myth of interstellar political coalition, the idea that there's a vast network of planets that operate according to standardized rules. In most versions of this myth, an alien network is already out there, and they make contact with humanity once you become technologically advanced enough, usually after you develop faster than light travel. As a species, you have zero evidence that any of this is even possible, yet you've told this story more times than a mere human could count because you believe in it. That's capital B. You want it to be true so badly that you're rushing to get people off your little rock. I suppose I'd want to do the same if I were trapped on the same planet my whole life. But I hope for your sakes that the rushing doesn't lead to too many harmful mistakes. Let's not forget the myth of the united human race. Much of your space-based science fiction takes place in a future where both the pet peeves and deep injustices of your kind have been rectified and smoothed over. Even in the 60s, a time when dark-skinned humans were barred from most positions of power, Star Trek dared to envision a future where Black human women could work as an officer aboard a Federation ship.
Oh, okay, and here's a paragraph on the next page on 90 that kind of gets into the, well, let me just read it. First of all, you've turned me, the galaxy, the Milky Way, from a character into a setting.
Yeah,
Instead of being a powerful God watching over you at night, I'm just the matter you fly through in your fancy ships.
yeah. Which, I mean, that, to me, that's a Christian-based statement, like,
Yeah.
we look at things and we think of it as matter, but not as like a character that's living,
Mhm.
which, I mean, who's to say it isn't, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, and I think honestly, like galaxies, I think the largest things we can probably comprehend. So considering a galaxy a god is, I don't think too far off from, you know.
Right. You can see how our ancestors might have, certainly gone there.
Yeah.
Well, writers have written science fi or mythical books. I think back the most typical example would be Jules Verne's science fi books. You remember Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea? Impossible. Nobody could do that. Or the trip to the moon. That's impossible. It's just a myth. But, it's never going to happen. Nobody could do that. And, a myth that until the 1700s, people would get put in jail because they believed that the Earth was the center of the universe, and Galileo was in jail for 20 years because of that. And only recently his family got exonerated and apologized because, well, we've learned that they're not so. And look at this satellites we're sending up to the this experimental space things. They sent another one the other day that's like 8 years to get to Saturn. And, the people that sent it will be 8 years older, and the 8-year-olds will be 16. And it's fascinating. And we got a group of people training to go to the Mars. Well, now that's going to be a fascinating. I'll probably be dead and gone when that happens. But that's fascinating, the myth. And even the scripture says that the God's a mystery, and they're not going to find out it's a spirit. Somebody show me a spirit. I'd love to see a spirit. But do they exist? Well, I believe they exist, and I believe but I can't prove it.
Right. Well, and oh boy, I could really go down a rabbit hole.
That's good. Rabbit holes are fine. You might know rabbits down there.
A black hole. Yes. But the idea of the dark matter that doesn't absorb light, it doesn't reflect light, it doesn't interact with photons at all. It's something we can't see, but it exists. I don't know. This is probably really far-fetched, but who's to say, maybe God's made of dark matter or something along those lines. It really brings into the realm of your imagination what is possible that we can't even fathom is possible.
Right. Which I think is where mythology comes in. It's like science yes, there are theories and they know that they have to prove them, but it almost comes to a point of like, this is what I understand, so it has to be true. And the idea of creating myths and legends says, this is what I think is true, even though I know it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And so it leaves that room for imagination of like, I'm making up this story because I know that it's wrong, but yet it's still like, it explains everything that I that I think and understand.
Mhm.
And so it leaves that humility and that sense of wonder and growth and splendor alive that can continue even once we discover certain parts of that and how it works. The myth doesn't have to change.
Mhm. Mhm.
Whereas if you come up with something too concrete of here's what it is, it has to change because something actually proves it wrong. Whereas a myth, I don't think you can prove wrong. I mean,
Right, there's
yeah, you prove,
flexibility.
I mean, it's like you
within
prove the
it.
things wrong, like the details, but the whole overarching thing is still alive,
Yeah.
at least in my
Yeah,
mind.
it still functions to explain whatever that core, whatever that nugget is,
Mhm.
of truth that's in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I loved how, like, so obviously, yeah, the Milky Way is personified, but then so are every, the Andromeda Galaxy is personified, Sagittarius A, which I think it's one of the closest black holes. So Sagittarius is,
She calls that starge.
right, yeah. So Sagittarius is a constellation. Or is a
Right.
is a
but
galaxy.
Sagittarius is.
And then there's
been named for
Sagittarius,
several
and then there's
different-
Sagittarius A, which I think it was a galaxy maybe. But there's Sagittarius A asterisk, and that is the black hole
The asterisk one is. the
that,
black
that
hole.
she names Sarge. And it's like, yeah, is the brightest, let's see, so it's kind of like,
Yep.
the bully, right? She kind of labels it as this bully that brings up all the shame and like the blemishes of her. And she starts talking about that, which you read it and it's almost like, as a teenager, right? Like all these makes you self-conscious and so forth.
Mhm.
She writes this one paragraph that I thought was funny. Recall your oldest, sharpest, most shameful memory, the one with jagged edges that still elicits the slow creep of hot mortification up your neck every time it rips through your mind. It's probably something like the time you single-handedly lost the most important sports game of the season, or you went on vacation for a week without asking someone to feed your pet gerbil. Whatever it is, thinking about it probably makes you uncomfortable, but it's just that thought, a fading memory of something that happened in the past. Sarge, however, is a physical embodiment of everything I have ever hated about myself. Every galaxy eaten, every misguided, flirtatious blunder, every undeserved snide comment directed at Sammy, which I believe was another star.
That's the small Magellanic cloud.
That's right. Yes, there's Sammy and there's
Larry.
Larry, which is the large. Right.
Magellanic
Yeah.
cloud.
Yeah, anyway, yeah, so there's just one. Oh no, it's down here, okay, so she goes on. The fact that we galaxies hold literal manifestations of our bad feelings within ourselves is perhaps the worst part of our lived experience. I guess it's the flaw in our design that refutes the possibility of an intelligent creator. But if it's a choice between having a black hole and having to wipe a butt, I'm choosing the first hole every
I
time.
was studying while I was laying down. I
The
have
other apes,
pharmacology.
the other apes on the planet don't seem to wipe their butts. But you lot gave that up just so you could walk upright. I mean,
What page was that on?
when can you miss a good butt joke? Page 120.
Yeah, she went there.
Yeah. If it's a choice between having a black hole and having to wipe a butt, I'm choosing the first hole every time.
Yeah, I think I take one of those.
That was a good, that's almost worth
That
the
is
entire
good.
book.
Shaking your head.
Let's see what else is there.
Without mystery and mythology, you can call it whatever you want, or whether it's a myth or just a mystery. A myth is something that we've discovered, and that we don't believe it, so we make it a myth. But a mystery is a mystery, and we're still trying to define what it is. What is in that black hole? I think they're trying to figure that out. And some sure that maybe it's not as black hole or empty as they think it is, or not as full as they think it is. Because nobody can see gravity. They can know it exists, can't see it.
Yeah, yeah, you see its effect on things.
Mhm. Right, when she was talking about the four forces, she did say that gravity is the one that
It's the weakest.
it's the weakest.
Yeah.
But scientists can't explain it. They can't explain how it works by particle
Right,
physics.
yeah,
Well, I just put some bars up in my garage that are magnetic, that holds tools. I can't explain why a piece of metal is magnetized and drags and holds on to another one. And maybe the scientists can explain that, but it's almost a defying of gravity. It's like a miniature black hole, maybe, that sucks everything in, only sucks metal.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just
That's
fascinating to think about it. I'm not smart enough to write a book.
Well, right, and yeah, magnetism. I'm not enough of a scientist to understand any of how that works, but I've always marveled at things like, you know, when you run a magnet under a piece of paper and you have the little flecks of
yeah,
metal
yeah.
and it makes a
Iron
certain
shading.
shape, like the poles. And the aurora borealis is miraculous to me.
Well, the magnetism between two people, I think that's a spiritual magnetism. You know, of course, we have this passion, this sexual passion, which is not the same thing, at least to me now. It's different, but that has nothing to do with the invisible love that God has, or that you have or can have, the spiritual magnetism for another person, like a child that you bore, or someone that's just, for some reason, you just have a spiritual relation that's a magnetism with that other person, male or female. Has nothing to do with passion or Hollywood. It's just that it's a caring thing. And where does it come from?
Well, right, and there are personalities that you attract each other, and there are personalities that you kind of repel each other, like.
And that's a mystery. That is a mystery.
Yeah.
Our brain tells us that, but it's our heart and our brain. But really, basically, down inside, it's the ego system or spirit. To me, it's a spiritual thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I cannot define a spirit. It is a mystery. Maybe it's a mythical. Maybe spirits are mythical. Well,
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Which is why I think I continue liking myth, because the point of a myth isn't to, at least in this case, in this sense, isn't to prove whether or not it's true. It's to describe what's happening. So you don't.
Right.
I mean, yeah, continuing that talk of like, you don't. You're not on the same plane, right?
Right,
It's kind
right.
of the opposite of scientists, where they're trying
Well,
to.
my belief in a mystical spirit, if anybody ever can prove that there is no such thing as a mystical spirit, my belief's a myth. But in my head, it's not a myth, or in my heart and spirit.
Right.
God is a mystery, and that's going to be.
Yeah.
Well, and there's, I forget where the scripture is.
Milky Way is not a mystery. Milky Way, we can see it.
Yeah, seeing through a glass darkly.
People have
there's-
landed on the moon, they've landed on
Yeah.
landing satellites on Venus and someplace else out there, thousands of miles, millions of miles, away, light years away.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Susan?
I forget where I was going with that. There was something that I was about to bring up along the lines of myth, but not. It was like one of the theories that a scientist she was talking about came up with that was against everything of the time. And she said that he stopped short of actually completely figuring it out, because in his mind, he didn't think that the galaxy or whatever body it was could possibly be that large.
Oh, right.
Do you remember that part? I'm trying to remember where that was.
Yeah, but I don't.
Yeah, I might find it.
This sounds interesting. I hope you find it.
Yeah.
Kind of where it was.
While you're finding out another kind of funny point in the book. So she's talking about the Andromeda galaxy, which Andromeda was a princess, had to do with Perseus and, Greek mythology, so it was named after a princess. It says, it's a good thing that Andromeda galaxy wasn't technically named after a princess, but instead after the constellation, which was named after the asterism, which according to the story was a celestial embodiment of a princess's spirit. So we've come so full circle, and that means we should move on. Like I think it's just funny. That's like, okay, it's a single little reference. We don't need to talk about it anymore. We're
She
moving on.
admits that and she
Yeah.
just gets
And then-
on with it.
So then she goes on. So if you want to see the Andromeda constellation and the smoke show of galaxy enclosed within, you'll need to be on the right part of your planet, which shouldn't be too difficult, even though so much of the Earth's surface is covered in water that you never learn to stand on. Although I've heard some rumors about at least one human walking on it. Yeah, I mean, there's references to Jesus in here and other things, so it's pretty funny. But yeah, it goes into, talking about, dividing our celestial sphere into regions, which, oh goodness, what's his name? They came and talked to us. But yeah, he mentioned that, like, yeah, there's the
guy,
hemispheres and stuff that are on the sky.
like the dome.
The dome, like, yeah,
The sky.
we know that the stars are way out there, but it's easy to just map it on a two-dimensional surface. But yeah, he mentioned that and she mentions it. So it's always interesting when you hear like the same information coming from kind of
Multiple sources.
different sources. Yeah, kind of makes the world a little smaller, which I enjoy.
Yeah, it's connections.
Continuing on, so on page 190, it's where she talks a lot about the writer John about the book of Revelation. It says one version comes us from John of Patmos, at least that's what modern human researchers call him, after the Greek isle where the text was purportedly written, who lived less than a century after Jesus died, and whose work, the book of Revelation, appears in the second installment of the Christian Bible, the New Testament. In the book, John describes how Jesus appeared to him and told him of the impending end of the world, and how he then traveled to heaven to hear the particulars of it from a group of loose-lipped angels. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek. They foretold that 4 horsemen were sent by God to herald the end of the world, bringing conquest, war, famine, death upon it, and the sinister equestrians and their equally menacing horses, probably bitter about the whole saddle thing, which the saddle is the kind of estimate of what the universe is shaped like.
Oh, a saddle?
Yeah, which I kind of understood, but not quite.
It's interesting.
So God would also send 7 angels to blight the land. The angels bring pestilence to the non-believers, turn seas and rivers into blood, cast the world into darkness, and trigger all kinds of natural disasters. After all, it isn't really the end of the world without floods, earthquakes, and fiery rain, right? Suppose the story has a happy ending for John's readers, though, for God's victory isn't complete until the world's been destroyed, which I think is kind of hilarious. All the souls judged and faithful resurrection into a new world. Real lighthearted stuff. So here's kind of a point. The chapter is called Doomsday. But it does kind of bring up like she does make it similar and draw connections to the Norse mythology of Ragnarok, which I don't know much about, even though they made a movie about it. With Thor. But she does mention that like a lot of them like end in destruction. Like there's somehow like Doomsday ends with just, everything just exploding. And she mentions like, and she mentions that like part of it is like our desire to finally see other people getting what they deserve, right, in us. Like, people like the people who have hurt us are finally getting hurt, and everything is just getting destroyed, and other things are, the idea that things must end, and if it's the world, it must be this large apocalyptic thing. But she mentions like, there's like, she talks about different ways that the universe or the Milky Way can die, and it's like most of them aren't going to be like this large thing. It's like there's different ones. There's the big freeze or the big chill, and there's the big bounce, and there's the big whatever. But really, it's a lot of just is it there the Earth or the universe just slowly expanding until gravity can't hold it together and it just kind of fades away, or as everything fades, as everything also expands, things get colder. Like there's not enough energy bouncing around, and so eventually everything will get to 0 Kelvin, which means nothing moves.
Nothing, right.
So that's the big
move
chill,
it.
right? Everything it just gets so cold that it crashes. And then there's the other one is I think it, So but it's like it kind of goes against that like, no, things will just eventually deteriorate, and it's not going to be this big everything explodes. And again, all this is going to happen way after Earth is around, because the sun's not going to last any longer. I don't know. It's very interesting to think that far ahead of us.
Like billions of years ahead of us.
Trillions of years.
Yeah.
Well, it mentions like one of the options. It's like when the end is like when the stars go out, and like there's one that has, I can't remember, something to the 100th power, which I think they just made up this number. But there's a specific word for it, and I can't remember what it's called. It's like duo quintillion or something. I mean, it's like there's just
You have to go out and get some more juice out of the garage.
it's like, so we have
Okay.
milli, billy, trilly, quad, quint, sept. But after a while, they run out of those, and they just start adding on another number in front of that, like duo, quit, like I think, right, it's like 10, like 15 is like something, duo is twice, it's just nuts. But I don't know where I was going with that, other than, it's interesting. Yes, it is one that like, she uses, like the Bible as she mentions that like other Abrahamic religions, right, Judaism and Islam are all similar in their like end of the world type things. guess she did mention something else. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, it's interesting that the Norse and Christian doomsday stories, as well as dozens of others from around your world, start with the ages of violence and corruption among humans. The apocalypse is a punishment, or maybe, according to some, a gift from God. It is a final triumphant cleansing of evil from the world. At least that's what the prophets want their audiences to believe. From where I was standing, which was and will continue to be all around you, it looked like the stories were a means of maintaining social order. Everyone better be good, or I'll send another flood to wipe everything out, said Yahweh, Enlil, Vishnu, and other gods who were said to decimate civilizations with great deluges. There were a lot of floods, but regardless of the destruction method, doomsday stories serve a different purpose than myths of the afterlife. They went beyond teaching about the consequences of individual actions, though that lesson certainly isn't absent when it's the righteous and the faithful who survive in the next world. Doomsday myths are about the consequences of human behavior as a whole. And then it goes on to, which, I mean, that's another kind of interesting little tidbit that we can unpack as
Say love
Christians.
your neighbor as you love yourself.
Yes.
We really
Let
don't
that out.
the consequences of human behavior as a whole, really, and like, at least in my Midwest evangelical upbringing, it was, everything was on an individualistic level.
Well, and a tendency to see other as what needed to be eliminated, or, not doing certain things in order to avoid what is going to bring about your destruction
Right,
as a sinner.
yeah.
It's awful quiet. I put it on mute for a minute because Dallas come by and Sheila come by and they were asking questions.
Okay. Heard someone in the background.
Yeah. Anyway, Bible says everything will be destroyed except what you can't see.
Right,
That's probably a myth, maybe. Everything that you see was made from everything you can't see, according to scripture in Hebrews and in 2 Corinthians.
yeah,
I think it's maybe it's not second something or other. Anyway, it says that everything you see will be destroyed, but the only thing eternal is what you can't see. To me, that is spirit, and that is God. So maybe all of the universe, all the stars and everything we see now, who knows? And there are dead stars. The scientists and the astronomers say that there are stars that don't exist anymore. We're still getting light from them because they exploded. And the light is just now getting here, like hundreds of light years away. And I think a light year is supposed to be 3 or 5 million miles or something like that. I forgot what it is. It's a long ways.
much longer than that.
And you can't imagine something being 10, 12, 13 light years away.
Yeah, because light travels at 360,000 feet per second.
186,000 miles per second.
I can't remember what it is.
With the
1 minute,
Right.
we're Googling it. That's right, I think it is 186.
I think it's miles.
Well, also, some scientists have said that they believe that the universe is expanding faster than light, and that they thought light was a certain speed, but they think maybe it's going faster. And the scientists originally said, well, the universe was expanding at slower and slower speed. But some people are thinking it's actually expanding it faster. Now, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So the great explosion, it wasn't because when you explode something, it goes a certain ways and then it kind of quits going. But there's stuff out there in the ether in it or in infinity still being formed. So
Right,
I
and
don't
all
know.
the matter,
That's a
Like-
myth or a mystery. It's a both.
even when a star explodes, the material is used, I mean, sometimes gets used to make other stars.
Mhm.
From what
Yeah.
she was saying here.
Yeah, so it's 186,000 miles per second. That's how fast
How
light,
much?
186,000 miles
Miles per
per
second.
second, you're
Okay.
right.
Okay.
So a light year is how long light can travel in 1 year, which is, yes, I mean. it's
Mind-boggling.
ginormous, right?
Yeah. It's crazy. And when it reaches our eye, that's history, right?
Right.
It's been so
Yeah.
many,
I mean, that particle traveled billions of miles to get to your eye if it came from a star.
yeah,
And that's what the guy was saying, that he came, it's like, when you're looking at these stars, like, through a telescope, it's just a larger, brighter thing. So you're not doing it for like the spectacle really, but when you realize that what you're looking at and the distance those particles took, and now they're gone, and they're gone forever, and only you experienced it,
when it hit your eye.
right,
It exists no more.
which, I think it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, it really is. Yeah, so it's not if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? It's like, when a photon hits your eye, does it continue to exist? And I
Right.
think his answer is no.
Right, yeah,
Yeah, that also is mind boggling. And like you
Mhm.
said, that's pretty beautiful.
Yeah.
And that we exist for that to happen. It is humbling to me.
Yeah,
to think,
right, right,
To think that.
right.
Right, there was the galaxy that's 13 billion. That the light hitting us now is 13 billion light years away,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
and which is almost back to the beginning of the Big Bang.
Yeah,
She said.
yeah, we're seeing light basically from when it first was
from when
created.
it was first happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I like just the personification of all these things, right? So it mentions black holes, right? And she talked about
Oh,
like
yeah.
that this one was like, it's all the fear and stuff I have, and it's like, wow, this is like a kid with acne,
Uh-huh.
right? And just this very insecureness and all that stuff. And then it talked about how there will be one time when the Andromeda Galaxy and the Milky Way will merge into one, right? And we think, wow, it's gonna collide and it's gonna explode. Well, it's like, well, no, because most of galaxies are air and gas anyway, like,
Oh, right.
it's not mostly stars, but the stars will
Almost
all
like
come
they just
together
slide together.
and they'll just,
Yeah.
and right, and she talks about like,
Well, and the stars continue
being-
to exist.
yeah,
in that
and so like
situation.
she mentioned, I mean, she doesn't use the word marriage, but it's like, oh, like this is like, she does kind of have like this romance, like writing love letters and sending stars out to the Andromeda Galaxy, and the Andromeda Galaxy sending stars back, and it's like, oh, there's this romantic, tryst, and they finally come together and get married, right?
Uh-huh.
I don't know, I think these like, it's an interesting thing about how like these very large beings of like personified to like.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and well, Sally and Larry, she talks about, aren't they kind of connected? No. Which there were two galaxies that are connected.
Yeah.
Was it Sally and Larry?
I can't remember.
That's because those are the match planet clouds.
Right.
Remember that there were two galaxies that were connected together.
Well, and she said like when she said she eats galaxies, right?
Right, yeah.
Which just means she kind of absorbed them. She's like, I didn't eat them. They're still there. If you want to pick out which stars were part of it, which she says could happen later, like as everything ages and everything kind of falls apart. Like some of these galaxies may like get pulled out and become their own separate galaxy again.
Yes, now Did she say that the Milky Way is part of our universe, if I remember some of
Yes.
my studies? And our universe theoretically might be rotating around a larger universe.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay, now our universe we think is
That's
pretty big. We can't see the end of it by the naked eye. But maybe there's other larger universes, and they know there's thousands of universes now out there, light years away, millions of light years. And infinity, where's infinity end? It,
Right.
well, doesn't, I guess.
Right, well, I guess like we didn't know that there were thousands, millions of galaxies. You know, out there could be more universes.
mhm.
Till they send satellites out there and they find stuff.
Yeah, what's out there? And then both on a space and a time level, right? She talks about like, and actually the galaxy is in 4 dimensions and but you can't understand 4 dimensions, so I'm not even gonna go there, right?
So she doesn't, yeah,
Which is-
so she has.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that like, well, what happened before the Bang and before us? Like, I mean, we talk, it's like, well, yeah, because God didn't create anything. Well, it's like, but really?
But
there could
speck, the
yeah.
speck that the Bang came from.
Right.
Where did that, how did that?
Well, there's
exist?
some people saying that the Bang was not the beginning, but the end of something else.
Something else, and so maybe it's just perpetuated on and
Yeah.
on, but still. Where did all that come from?
Right, right. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Yeah.
then did God write the Bible millions of times already before us? And like what did, you know?
Right, is there Earth too? And, you know.
I mean, you grew up thinking, well, no, like we're the only planet because God didn't mention anything else and there wasn't anything before us. I'm like, but that's very kind of self-centered and earth-centric, and it's like,
Yeah.
and it's like, you grow up and you hear that and you're like, and you're told, no, like God loves us, not, I mean, but it's like,
Yeah.
well, if God really loves unconditionally and has all loving, then he could make millions of other planets and systems and still have enough love for you,
Right.
right? I mean, that's what I think we lose is we grew up thinking, well, if there were other planets and stuff, then, oh, we weren't the only child.
Mhm.
But our parents, like God, the parent God isn't like our parents where they could only have enough love and attention for
For one.
one or
sibling or one
two
child.
siblings. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it would be very similar to that. Seems like God. would be
Yeah,
capable of
it does bring up a
more.
lot of questions about I mean, like this for me, like, okay, well, what do I believe? And what does that mean for my faith and relationship with God?
Mhm, mhm.
But that's
Interesting.
But that goes back to, go ahead, Chuck.
Just kind of interesting to listen to y'all talk, and I'm thinking your brains are just really working overtime with theories and thoughts and what happens and what ifs, and mine's doing the same thing. You know, what if God has got the creator, whatever that is creating this earth and these people, and he said, well, it's working pretty good. I think I can do a better job if he had a thought, a brain, create something better. 2 million light years out here and somewhere God's forever. God is universal. God is cosmic.
Yeah.
God is spirit. He's everywhere at the same time.
And maybe multi-universal.
Yeah, universal.
Right.
And why did my brain think of those for? It's just a piece of hamburger up there in my skull.
Yeah. But I mean, I guess it goes back to like, maybe, I think that's the problem when we use our belief as not a myth, but as truth, then it's open to be proved and disproved. And so when it's disproved, you run into very, you have these existential crisis or a faith crisis of like, oh, I proved it wrong. And it's like, well, no, if you're just looking at it not as like, it's not meant to be proven as fact, it's meant to be proven as a myth, as something that's more universally true than what it is. And so if you look at, when we read scripture and we have our faith is that, then yeah, all this other stuff can be proven and we can find more clarity in it. But as Chuck said, like no one can disprove my faith. It's impossible.
Right.
Like you can maybe clarify it, or you can maybe like tweak on it, but you're not gonna.
But
You can't disprove it.
disprove it, right?
And we always, yeah, again, I think it's, if we look at it as myth as the ultimate truth, rather than just a story or, falsehood. I think we just, maybe it's semantics, but I think we just kind of misdefined that word and what these kind of, the legends of our ancestors
The word myth,
mean. Yeah,
you're saying.
or legend. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
like there's sometimes you hear legend, you're like, yeah, that's a funny story, but like there's inspiration in it that like that push us forward.
Yeah. There's I was having a talk with Pastor Sandy one time. I kind of went through a crisis of faith because I grew up, in a pretty conservative background and went to work for Allen Press proofreading, the microbiology journal and
Oh, right.
that kind of stuff. And so in my Western Kansas high school, we were never taught about evolution or that it could really exist. But so I went through a time where I had some real doubts, and I came in and talked to Pastor Sandy, but the thing that helped me most that she said was that you don't pin your faith to any particular scientific theory, or, in this case, I guess it would be whatever science is telling you is true about the universe. You pin your faith to God, because God is overall and through all and in all, whatever the science of it is.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, that's the book. I thought it was good. And it's short, relatively. It's 250 pages, something like that. So. Any other comments before we wrap up and talk about next month's book?
I have.
So next, I kind of timed this as the weather's getting warm. We can go outside more often now. So the next book is The Lost Art of Reading Nature's Signs.
Yeah, I read that. I already read it. I didn't particularly care for it, but I didn't read all of it, but I skimmed through it. And it's pretty good. About should be the Boy Scouts probably would love it better.
Right. Well, and I think it's pretty long, but anyway, the subtitle is Use Outdoor Clues to Find Your Way, Predict the Weather, Locate Water, Track Animals, and Other Forgotten Skills. And it's kind of long. I think it's almost 400 pages. But I figured, we could, you find a section that you thought, oh yeah, that'd be fun to learn that I didn't before. Again, something to, little tricks and
I
stuff.
think we had to turn the book in. I reread it and I think I had to turn it in, and sorry about that. I didn't write some notes down on it. But there was a couple of sections that I thought was good.
Yeah, it's Tristan Gooey, and he's written several different ones of these. So I just picked one of them. There's one called How to Read Water, How to Read Nature. I think there's one about how to read clouds,
Cool.
So, and this one may be just a bunch of all those, so.
Yeah, it sounds interesting.
So, yeah, I thought, and we can, I might talk to Matt and the other blue team to say, hey, like, maybe we go on a hike or something and see if we can't,
Like a nature hike.
use some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
That'd
kind of
be
brought out
fun.
the inner Boy Scout in me from back in the day, so. Yeah, so if you, feel like picking it up and reading, I don't think you need to read all of it, there's different little chapters and stuff that I would assume can be read independently from the whole thing, it's not a narrative, so. That's, what's next month, May?
May, what's the date?
Oh, good question, I do have it.
Let's look. May,
31st?
do we do the last Wednesday of the month? Yes, it's a fifth Wednesday. So
Yeah, so we've got like,
It's a good.
we got a good
long time.
5
to read
weeks
the book.
still there, yep.
Very good. Well, thanks for picking this one. I enjoyed
Yeah,
what I read. I want to finish it. I haven't read it all yet,
yeah,
but
I thought
so that one sounds good.
it's a decent book. All right. Until
Okay.
next.
Good to see you, Chuck.